Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning! Welcome to, surprisingly, a sponsored challenge run. So we're actually going to be doing a Gryphon-only run of the entire series. We've done this with fairies before, and it might be kind of weird to hear that the Griffins are actually way harder. But anyway, let's get on with the sponsor for today. So that would be the Gryphon Insurrection series by K. Vale Nagel. They've been a long-time friend of the channel, great friend of mine. And yeah, if you like stories about war, politics, and the surprising amount of decapitations and cities burning down, then it will absolutely be your jam. So I'll include a link in the description there. Just a great read in general. I mean, I've been helping proofread the books and all that for a little bit now. So either way, great stories. So moving on. The characters most of the characters anyway, for the team will be primarily attempting to be named after the books. Bear in mind, for logistical reasons, occasionally there will be extras. Like, for example, technically the first 3 Griffins in the run can't be renamed. Stuff like that. Anyway, let's get into some challenges that this run's going to run into here, because surprisingly they are plentiful. So we've done this with fairies before. The fairy run was absolutely ages ago. And, well, fairies in general you'd think would be small and frail and flimsy and whatever else, and you got these big meaty, chonkin' horse birds over here. So how exactly is this going to be difficult? Well, primarily because they can only do 2 things in this game in particular. I can't wait till we get to Reborn, when you can actually just shred entire maps with them. But at this point, they are a very funky type of unit. Namely, they are primarily a bulky physical unit whose main strength comes from the fact that they've got pretty decently high health. In every one of the other games, they've got very high movement. However, this time around, they're, for some reason, one of the slowest units as far as movement goes. Great agility in terms of dodging and things. Well, I guess decent-ish agility in terms of dodging and things. And then, well, great bulk in general, but they've only got 2 moves. A, to peck something, which isn't very strong, and B, a windshot ability, which they only get at level 10, and for whatever reason seems to scale off intelligence, which they don't have. So anyway, that's going to get to be a bit of a problem down the road, but in the meantime, let's go ahead and talk about what was set up here. So the character we're going with is Roran. They're from, they're actually one of the ones from the series there. Essentially a guy known for going and chucking spears through faces and impaling people and whatnot. So for most of the run, they're going to be running around with a great bow that they just picked up off the floor at the very start. It seemed thematically appropriate. And since they're supposed to be the head of a fisherfolk village, essentially just kind of a general well-accepting place for refugees and what have you, they're going to be attempting to, well, recruit pretty much everybody that asks along the way, including doing the extra fairy fights and stuff like that. Again, it just seemed appropriate given last time. So they're going to be swearing to get a victory over the course of this whole thing. And yeah, let's just say that by the end, stuff got a little bit fancy, shall we say. So we're going to start, as far as emblems go, actually start off with arbitration here, because he will be, again, attempting to recruit people as much as possible, since recruitment is going to be one of those things that definitely had a increase in price for a little while there for a reason. It's definitely, diplomacy is always surprisingly one of the strongest things that you can do in these games. Any darn ways. So our main purpose here is, well, at first even get some Griffins in the first place. You can't actually recruit any Griffins until you get up to Fermito Fortress. So at that point is when we'll be able to at least get a few of these named ones going. However, we can technically get a few out in the wild before then. So that's why I was saying there's going to be occasional logistical issues with acquiring certain kind of units at certain times. Like, obviously, in something like March of the Black Queen, we'll be able to get them a few maps in. In something like the original Let Us Cling Together, they're basically one of the first units that we're able to recruit. And, man, honestly, I have no idea how we're going to do SNES Lucked, because heavy units sucked so hard in that one. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But yeah, in Night of Lodis, they're a solid okay. They're probably arguably one of the worst of the beast units in this one, but they are fun to use at any rate, especially once we get Windshot available and it just simply becomes a mortar barrage with pretty much every map. So, at any rate, apparently, at some point I decided to pause that thing there. Yeah, we're going to go about this in a little bit of a different format, trying to get the whole video going in one solid, hopefully smooth chunk. Obviously, these are a little bit of a complication to set up. But we start off with the storm, as always, going to be looking to set up a few different emblems as quick as we can. The idea primarily being to, to get Mr. Roran here bulked up as much as he can. I was very, very tempted to go and Photoshop in, like, a crane's head over his face, and when I was going and looking into times that other folks had tried to mess with art in the game and whatever else, it just didn't take it particularly well, unfortunately. Night of Lodis is one of those ones that just really does not handle a lot of software changes too nicely. A lot of things make it crash. But we start off with self-preservation right off the bat. Nothing too fancy in the intro. Get a little bit of extra experience from going and attacking the commander as you do, and then pick up self-preservation from him, get shot in the face, and then go for a little bit of a swim. Thankfully, he is not much of a swimmer, so naturally he's just going to fall straight into a dating scene. So, of course, if you, from what I've seen from the community around the Gryphon Insurrection series there, generally speaking, there's been a few shipping attempts for Roran there. He is generally one of the more liked characters, so naturally this is not going to shy away from doing the exact same thing. So we're going to go for the B route in this particular one. It just, seems right. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, this is supposed to be a Gryphon-only run, what the hell is she doing there? Well, considering that commander units are required throughout the series, we are still going to have beast tamers and or other equivalents whenever possible. They just ideally are not going to be attacking units. They might be saying, wait a minute, but she can be a dragon tamer. That's only for dragons. Yeah, don't worry, we'll sort that problem out down the road. So, we start off by getting ourselves paid, as you do. Just wake up right from a sea-logged coma, get some money, and get right to doing absolutely nothing with it except buying a punching bag. So we do our tradition here, pick up Ouch the Fairy. We do this for the purpose of, a few little setup things right here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start working on getting our ideal weapon there, picking up our early great bow. We're going to go pick up our dragon shield. And then we're also going to go back and pick up some emblems. So we got Arbitration, we got Fist Fight from going and unarmed fighting the fairy. We got Initiation from, dodging said fairy a few times. And then we go straight into our setup here with the Cressida fight. So anyway, as far as Cressida is concerned, this fight is as it usually goes. You can pick up that dragon shield early to help you out with this. And essentially the way that it goes is that you're trying to get yourself surrounded by as many units as possible, having Ivana heal you while you use Fist Fight to go and deal roughly 50 damage every time they are hitting. However, being an absolute idiot, for some reason this time around I decided to do it with a short sword. I did this setup for Fist Fight, and then just forgot to take the weapon off. So, at least on the plus side, this means that we can attack without just using the shield, because otherwise you have to rely on them attacking you, because if you're equipping a bow or a shield, you cannot attack with your fist, because this isn't Reborn. Anyway, so we end up carving through this entire map in order to pick up Mark of the Elite, as well as Centurion, which will give us a few more bonuses. So, Self-Preservation is handy because it combines with Fist Fight to give us insane damage. Centurion and Mark of the Elite just give us an extra level, as well as just kind of improve stats overall. Then we'll pick up War God and Berserk from one-punching the fairy from those recent stats we acquired. And now our solo setup is complete, just in time to never use it again. So, we now go down to our first 3 Griffins. I can't really rename these guys, but being a beast tamer, this gives him 40% odds of recruiting them, which is pretty fantastic, because it rolls all 3 pretty much immediately. So we get our new friends, I guess we just sort of tolerate this weird bird thing that's following us around, and then we proceed to attack a fortress, because what else would you do with your birds? So, this is when it starts to become clear that these guys, despite having fairly intimidating, looks here, they're not exactly much of a powerhouse. Again, reading through the novels there might give us a little bit of a different opinion over how many necks are getting snapped by these guys, but when they decided to come down to Ovis, stuff got nerfed pretty severely. These guys, functionally speaking, are the physical equivalent of a basic soldier attacking-wise. They've got better bulk. Like, in general, they've mostly got better bulk. These particular soldiers have better bulk than they do in this case. But that's probably just some level shenanigans. And additionally, aside from being able to fly, they're just kind of a downgrade in most directions. In fact, they don't even have better movement than basic soldiers at this point, so unfortunately these little Pidgeys are going to be having one hell of a hard time. We're basically outnumbered, we're outgunned, we're kind of limited in terms of our items. Thankfully we did get the 10 Mendleaf startup setup here. I wasn't really going for any particular initial startup, I was kind of just going for the answers that seemed fitting for Mr. Roarin here. But yeah, overall, finally switched him over to his spear chucker, as I was mentally calling it, because there are no throwing spears in this particular one. But dang it, he's going to get his great bow. It's the closest thing that he's got. Ultimately, he'll end up carrying that thing through pretty much the entire run. So it took a whole lot of heal spamming and a whole lot of just surrounding and isolating units. Took out the casters, took out the healer, and ultimately they finally managed to catch up. Thankfully, their dodge rates are pretty decent, but you can probably tell by the really low health at this point that we were running extremely ragged in terms of our supplies. Unfortunately, it started becoming clear at this point that yeah, we were going to need to rely on that bulk to survive as long as possible, and then just kind of cheese fights out from there. So we had a bit of an unfortunate block from Grymal here, and ultimately, there we go. He ends up getting eaten, and now we can recruit more birds, because obviously the only time that birds will show you the time of day is if you get tortured first. I don't know, they're just sort of into that sort of thing. So we start off with our first batch of dudes here. I forget if I put the whole typing process in. Apparently I did. So we started off with our first Askel of the run. Now, I will say, part of the run I did while dead tired. So we had Askel, Treadle, Karu, and Quess here. So Quess is the one that we're going to be using for getting as many aquatic kills as possible over the course of the run. She's supposed to be the one that's ambushing stuff out of the ocean and whatnot. But given that there aren't too many oceans, as many, as much as lakes and rivers and things, we kind of did our best on that one. She does get her say on the Rana Sea anyway. But we get our first whole team here. We throw them into a little bit of training to hopefully give them some bit of a chance, because again, they only have 2 moves that they can do, and one of them they can't even access yet. You'd think that they would have a big advantage when fighting over here in the river, but unfortunately, yeah, the Hawkmen will just completely outfly them, outfight them, out-everything them. And yeah, apparently decided to just sort of stand still in the water for a while. I think I was taking a screenshot at the time. But yeah, we primarily have them fly around Roarin over there to go and get their bonus. It's not as much as you think it is. And yeah, had them surround a ferry and, well, just eat the dang thing, as you do with the little birdies. Had a talk with the religious lady, and then went to go throw some ninjas out of a port city. Obviously, when it comes to a competition of gigantic falcon horse things versus ninjas, this is just a tale as old as time, and so naturally we end up going and stealing all of their jewelry. Pretty much that's the only reason you'd go for any of these units in the back, because their leader is a bit of a pushover. Anyway, so that was a complete joke. Basically, Griffins hard counter anything lightweight, so anything that's another agility class, so stuff like archers, ninjas, and what have you, typically don't have a tendency to last very long versus these birdies. So anyway, one absolute massacre later, this guy's wondering what on earth he was thinking, but he does have a cool sword that we're going to go sell to the nearest pawn shop in just a little bit here. And Askel gets their first kill of the thing. Now, bear in mind, again, I mentioned being really tired for part of the run. There are multiple Askels over the course of the run. I was like, hey, how do I have a Treadle and not an Askel? Well, I guess let's go ahead and replace them. Yeah, anyway, so we take a random fight because I wanted to see what we could get out of these randoms right now. Typically, you get pretty decent drops out of these guys, stat upgrades and such. These were fairly easy fights. In general, they tend to be fairly easy fights, but I didn't want to just kind of grind our way through using stat items. It would be really, really boring to say, hey, then they ate shiny rocks for the next 8 hours. Don't worry, our answer to a lot of problems later on will be much more dumb. So, Roarin goes and, just pretend he's got some, like, wings and extra feet or whatever. Same thing for her, just roll with it. Yeah, he just goes on about his dating life, as you do. And yeah, so yeah, then he's just kind of off about his business, and she's very believing in him. Words are hard. Words are difficult. funnily enough, despite the Griffin logo being a very common thing throughout the series, yeah, this one has lion griffins. I'm not sure what that's all about, because you never actually see a lion griffin throughout the series, as far as I'm aware. The closest you get is those sphinxes in OB64, which I'm gonna have to ask whether they're okay with sphinxes. I forget what the rules were exactly. I know griffins, pinnaci, and all related birds were considered to be, you know, an acceptable part of the challenge, so to speak. The idea was just to kind of stick with this archetype. So you might already see the problem in a map like this. Generally speaking, when it came to a lot of those bulk units, yeah, if they end up getting paralyzed or something like that, if they end up getting poisoned and paralyzed, they kind of can't really do anything. And given the limited movement of a lot of those other guys, the first of the Ascals ends up getting lost right there, just due to the fact that I couldn't get over to them with an anti-poison. It becomes very clear that these birds are extremely vulnerable to debuffs. Like, really, really vulnerable to debuffs. So, we went after some mermaids, as you do. So at this point, we had some fish in the water, we had the birds over there in their other island all doing their thing. We couldn't get our morale bonus, so they were just kind of trying their best to hold off against all these guys, drag them onto the water. As happens with this fight, the water ends up raising in about one turn in, so we mostly just had to hold out until the water ended up receding, which ended up giving a massive advantage to suddenly all of the landlocked floppy fish. Surprisingly, even with those massive advantages that usually render mermaids completely harmless, they're still dropping 30s. Their damage rarely goes above 30 over the course of this entire run. Yeah, it's not a great time. Any basic soldier with a fist can do more than that with pretty easy setup. Any darn ways. We go ahead and fire a warning shot into the water, and then she agrees to just talk this all out. So she decides, well, you know what? I tried diplomacy for about 3 seconds. That's more than I usually give it, and then we proceed to go attack their home anyway. She says how she'll never lose, and then it's at this point that they discover that we have wind shot all of a sudden. So wind shot is basically like thunder flare, except it comes off of a bird. I mean, literally, I had one of the birds equip a wind ring later on down the road in order to compare it with thunder flare, and it was basically the same thing for 1 extra MP. So there's that. Anyway, yeah, wind shot is pretty darn fantastic, considering that it's got pretty decent low end damage here. So for a lot of these cases where we can set up an entire team to just go and air barrage an entire area, it becomes an absolute cakewalk. In fact, I would say for a solid chunk of the game, these Griffins are actually a bit of a speedrun meta that probably wasn't ever explored. So I started speeding it up around this point because, frankly, the Knight of Lodis in general is just not the fastest game in the world. So yeah, there's a lot of discussion, and they're just going on about all their fish business, and we're here to eat fish. We're not here to learn about their politics. We don't care. We're like, over here, yeah, somebody filleted some fish. Great, when are we eating those? You never hear about that, you know? Never happens. So anyway, they're just going on and on and on and on. Like, dude, we know, you're fish, okay? You're supposed to be a snack. But oh well, you know, it is what it is. Roran's kind of bored by all this. He just kind of wants to get on about his business. But they do, later on, one of them offers it themselves as a travel snack, so we'll just go about it at that point. Anyway, meanwhile, he's just kind of pondering how much salt he'll need, and moving on. So, we go back to Sybil, who proceeds to do her whole spy thing, and yeah, then go back to the whole dating type situation, because this is exactly how courtships work. So, she's out late, hoping to see if she finds any more relationships washing up on the beach. Didn't quite happen this time. You know, better fishing next night, but oh well. Unfortunately, she gets attacked by a priest, as happens every now and then we go back to wind-shotting stuff. So, now that all the discussion is done, we get a just astounding two-hole fights between going back to mermaid cutscenes. So, we get lots of wind-shotting going on here for Karcist. He's, as you can tell, just about as weak to this as everything else, because again, this is basically considered a magic attack for whatever reason. I believe every other time through the series it's considered physical. This time around, they're just like, yeah, magic attack on a creature that has no magic in it. So, Eleanor just joins the party at this point. She decides to go randomly do some target practice on top of a volcano, as you do. And yeah, then everybody just went for a quick swim. Alright, and moving on. So, then we get back to even more fish politics. Good lord, the food won't stop talking around this place. It just happens and happens and happens. A bit of a random note, jokes aside, apparently there's a typo in this cutscene where they apparently misattribute Eleanor's age. I don't know if that's accurate or not, I never actually double-checked that. But according to one of the overhaul mods for this game, it's a thing. And yeah, they basically gave them sitting animations for this one cutscene alone. And yeah, then eventually the party can get right back to one-shotting stuff. Now that the food is done talking! So now we get to the end of summer, we get to Chapter 2, and then we remember that save states are a thing, and lots of cutscenes happen, as they do. And lots of pretty artwork for the GBA happens. I always love those little slidey cutscenes. And we get back to the scene where you have other soldiers filling in, just in case people were missing. Like if Sybil was not around at this point, you get Wizard Guy over there. So, anyway. So, yada yada yada, everybody does their chattering, and they proceed to talk some more. But then we get a whole lot of gameplay with a whole lot of cutscenes after this, so there's that. Anyway, this guy decides that he's got more impressive birds than we do. Little does he know those birds are about to be our birds, so that sounds like a whole lot his problem. So we get some new units, as you do, because it turns out just hitting them once with a counterattack and being able to immediately have a 40% chance of recruiting is a little bit broken. Anywho, so yeah, then this lady decides she's got a chance for some reason, so Windshot happens, as you do. Just lots of Windshot, lots of... We're continuing on here. You might be wondering, why on earth is it that we haven't gone and used all those stat charms at this point? Like, we already have an access... We pretty much can go into any random fight. We can go collect a million friggin' stat charms and hopefully end up boosting these guys up in some way, right? So, it turns out that when it comes to how much intelligence these guys actually need to... well, to do functional damage, aside from just going and air-shotting everything, it turns out to be quite a bit. I was asking a guy that actually works on modding this game and is currently working on another overhaul mod and whatnot. And apparently the actual amount that they would need would, I think they said that it would need to go up on like 2 or 3 per level to even be able to scratch anything. Because by this point, like, even with the entire team going and dumping on somebody, we can just barely kind of coast through bosses and whatnot. Like, it's a weird case where if they have sub 300 health, we can just coast through that boss, no problem. Everyone just rolls up, you know, turn 3, just drop all the wind shots, and we're good to go. And this is going to happen with Nightshard here as well. But anything that has any amount of resistance whatsoever, it does nothing, and this becomes a very regular problem. So if 30 times 8 is acceptable, then you can get by. So for example, Nightshard there, terrible resistance. Mr. Kodar here, terrible resistance. These guys are going to get absolutely, floundered by this thing. This guy always made me think of some kind of like Star Wars villain or something. I think it's just the red cape, But either way, while we do have access to basically infinite stat updates if we wanted to, realistically, with the amount of units that we need to get up there, I was hoping for something a bit more efficient. So, oh, and by the way, when we went into quest mode, basically I just wanted a few items to flesh units out, because I wanted to get some elemental rings to see if, maybe using them as magic casters would help, and that's when it started becoming clear that, oh no, even when they're using the magic and stuff like that, it's basically the same damage as this wind shot. It's not going to help us whatsoever. And conveniently, in a sort of fitting sense here, we ended up getting a Peregrine mail right off the bat. So there we go. We got our bird armor for our bird guy. It's close enough, dang it. It'll work. So we keep doing our wind shots, our wind storms, whatever you want to call it. They never give this thing a consistent name for some reason. And yeah, if you wedge all of your birds in a triangle formation, you can set these units up to a case where they will run ahead, they will surround your units, then you pull back and you drop all the wind shots, and it's a pretty convenient setup. You can do this for random battles and things. But these stat upgrades that we get from these guys are primarily going to be used for money. See, because we don't have any money this time around, despite the fact that we're selling everything, despite the fact that we're doing all this stuff. Griffins are expensive, so we get Marshmallow and Sheen added to the team. I remember who Marshmallow is. I'll be honest, I don't remember who Sheen was. So if we're if we're going back to actually explain who these characters were from the books, Haskell and Turtle are basically a tinker duo that have minor proclivities towards war crimes. Anyway, oh, by the way, I forgot about this. So when it comes to the fairies, we're basically going to tell them to go back to the forest, only because I wanted to see what would happen. I have never told them no, but yeah, you can just tell them to piss off, and then they just never come back. You don't see them in the ending, so I kind of thought that they would get a different ending or something. But yeah, no, there was nothing of the sort. So, yeah, you can just tell them to leave if you want, I guess, if you find them annoying, but either way, less mouths to feed, you know what? Maybe the bird troops won't be as tempted to go eat the bird things. You know, maybe it's just mean. Who knows? Any darn ways. So as far as the other characters go, let's see, I already explained Quest's deal. Who else did I have on the team? I forget at this point. I'll be honest, it's a bit of a scatterbrain thing. I went through names that seemed appropriate, and then in other times I ended up getting them completely wrong. So we ended up rehiring Haskell because I'm an idiot. But yeah, as you may notice, our funds situation is pretty dire. We have to pay $3 grand to actually recruit a Griffin. And if any of them die, that is a pretty significant amount of money. And also we have to retrain them every time because they have to be at level 1 because it's an extra 100 per level, which we simply cannot afford. The first couple that I hired at higher levels basically broke the bank, and then from then on out I just realized I could train them normally. Anyway, so we go deal with Nightshard again by just hiding on top of his walls and dropping wind shots on his face. In case you're curious, by the way, this is by no means a scattershot, randomly remembering things as they come up type situation whatsoever. I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, the bonus that they get when it comes to standing next to Roar in there, their big morale bonus, as it were. Yeah, it's only like 4 to 10 damage depending on the situation. It's barely anything most of the time. It feels like it's about 4 in this situation. As surprising as it sounds, though, that 4 damage difference will actually matter quite a bit later on down the road. And if you're wondering, by the way, why it seemed like that one guy had 2 damage numbers over his head there, it's because Margaret back there was hiding behind the wall, and I wasn't really sure where she went. So we lose our second unit of the run here, this Ethicos, one of the birds from that Beast Tamer guy from earlier. Yeah, quite simply, we don't have the money to go recruit any more cockatrices at this point. We do get them from this castle, I believe. But yeah, overall, there will only be 1 chicken left for the entire run. They'll be far more important later, and I actually thought that they were going to be more important, but that's a whole story of its own. We'll get to it when we get to it. So Margaret gets birded, as you do. Yeah, I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if you went through all your life training to be this professional soldier and then just the birds flapped real hard and you exploded. Yeah, nobody really sees that coming, is the thing. So, yeah, anyway. So we get the no toss, and then we'll go ahead and throw that at the nearest pawn shop. And we get Atropos, which naturally we go and train to our training dummy fairy, as you do. Gotta love it. Anyway, they'll totally use that. And then Richter decides, having seen all of this craziness firsthand, he'll just go ahead and fall on his knees and grovel. We're not even going to talk about that fight because there wasn't one. Yeah, Windshot is very, very broken for this portion of the game. Again, pretty much all the bosses are going to be coming in with sub 300 health, meaning that spread of roughly 30 damage over the course of 7 or 8 units is downright embarrassing for them. So, carrying on, we get to Nightshard, or not Nightshard, but Neris, the first guy that's a legitimate threat over the course of this run. He's the first guy that decides to show off by giving himself fewer units, which he'll definitely need later. Now, he's going to be the first one of these bosses that is not taking that 30 damage, because he pretty much outright resists the entirety of Windshot here, taking only 19 in this particular case. So it took multiple rounds of constant barraging. So what I did was I spread units all around the map here. Windstorm, or Windshot, Windstorm, whatever, has incredibly long range. So we just basically spread units around so that they couldn't get consistent hits off in the right places. So being fairly bulky units, we can just kind of spread them out and make sure that that damage is never concentrated, and then just bide our time. So once we get to turn 5, we have enough for 3 consistent rounds of wind barrages on this guy, which is going to completely overwhelm their healing, and we just simply keep dropping them over and over and over and over and over. by the end of this run, I was pretty much constantly running it in fast forward because, hey, I have a lot of tolerance for this game and its slowness, but sweet Jesus, that animation takes forever. Anyway, we end up getting chosen by the sparkly thing, and yeah, that guy decides to be evil and die for reasons. So we talk to Richter here, who forces himself onto the party, as you do. I guess we'll just sort of tolerate their curly hairness. Who knows? Maybe they'll be useful as a king later. I actually never realized, despite this being my favorite route to go down, somehow I never realized that Richter and Ivana end up getting together at the end of the story. I guess it kind of works. I just never really realized that. I don't know if it was something that particularly happened this time. I don't remember that ever happening. I'm sure it's happened multiple times, and I just simply wasn't paying attention. But either way. So we talk to them about the shiny thing. He says that he'll join the party whether we want that to happen or not. And yeah, so then we go ahead and do that. Anyway, from then on out, we proceed to go and do lots of this kind of thing. So I hope you like that fast forward icon in the top right. I didn't notice until later that it was actually saving in the video, but we're going to go ahead and talk faster to try and compensate for the speed that now is currently going on. Now, this particular map is something that I went and had these units going and doing over and over and over and over and over in order to try and get as much experience as possible, even though technically I kind of figured out last time during the fairy run that the faster way to do this is to actually go ahead and let two units fight it out right next to each other, which I ended up doing later. But we'll end up getting back to it when we get to it. At this point, I was going and training them up from levels in the low 20s in order to get them up to levels in the high 30s in order to attempt to try and make up for their overall kind of lack of power, as it were. But then I also realized another thing, that we actually have two units on the team here, which we'll introduce the second one in a moment, who would be able to recruit extra units. If we remember what happened last time, when we were going through the entirety of the Heaven's Gate there, well, there were a lot of things that would be a legitimate threat, and unlike the fairies by this point, nobody has gotten insanely perfect dodge odds or anything like that, and even with those perfect dodge units and, you know, crazy powerful attacks and everything, we still had casualties along the way. So I figured, you know what, there's no way I'm going to be able to afford to buy more of them. So I'm going to start recruiting units from this random mountainside. I remembered running into Griffins there before, so they've got Griffins, they've got Dragons. We won't be doing anything with the Dragons, but we do get some extra equipment to go and sell. We do get some extra units to kind of pad out the numbers, as it were. And we go and we end up selling off the stat boosting items and end up buying a lot of these, well, a lot of healing salves and armlets of agility. So here's the thing. I made a mistake over the course of this run, because for some reason I thought that Windstorm scaled off of agility. I don't know why I thought that, because why would it? It's just something I always assumed, okay? Information on these guys is very sparse, because frickin' nobody uses Griffins. So there's that. Anyway, so basically, even with a lot of our stat upgrades from insane amounts of grinding and over-leveling these guys, we basically are still doing 20s when we're going and attacking bosses at this point. Meaning that we need to survive multiple rounds of being hit by everything on the map while spamming essentially one type of attack and hoping nothing heals. So while their physical attacks are getting better, because they're able to overpower most of the units just kind of directly at this point, when it comes to being able to spam stuff at long range, it's becoming less and less viable. Thankfully, most of the stuff on this map is fairly squishy, but we start noticing another thing at this point, that I can't really afford to get stuff like angel fruits or revive stones. We just simply don't have the money for it. And these guys have no way to resist something like Petrifying Gaze. So that's a fun problem on its own. And at this point, we also started noticing that, well, there's a lot of units that they can go and bully, so we just have them go around pecking the entire map. Thankfully, the Gorgons weren't able to petrify the entire team. Hint, hint, that'll absolutely happen later, and we'll go ahead and get to that when we get to it. Boy, oh boy, I hope these edits don't sound too awkward, because, man, I absolutely love allergy season. It's absolutely wonderful to sit down and have your nose absolutely self-destruct at every single possible opportunity. So anyway, as we go around going and repeatedly backstabbing stuff all around this map, because these guys can't afford to possibly take a counterattack, we regularly end up losing more and more units to that Gorgon, which we can't quite catch up to because we are being outsped by a snake, which definitely makes sense for a bird, because clearly there's nothing in nature that would possibly back that up going the other direction. Anyways, so at this point we just keep bullying Leith here, we keep attacking these giants and whatnot. This actually ended up being surprisingly beneficial over the long term for anyone that's unfamiliar with why. A lot of these guys are going to be dropping more special items at this point. Specifically, if you kill off the giants, one of them ends up dropping a Snapdragon, which I generally didn't want to go use as an actual weapon. But either way, it did give us an interesting little thing for later. So Sybil ends up serving as our mini-boss for this particular section, which ends up working out very nicely because, yeah, she's a squishy absolute joke. So, alright, so the demon guy decides, yeah, you know what, this guy with all these birds, you know what, we need a wizard to deal with this, and obviously birds eat wizards. So, yeah, this will go about as well as he thinks it does. The wizard goes smush, and we fittingly get Thunderbird out of it, which we'll never use. So, carrying on. Demonic Voice does demonic voice stuff. Now that I think about it, I probably should have used Eleanor as a witch and, or not a witch, but probably as a siren and let her go and do her thing with Thunderbird, huh? That would have been pretty thematically appropriate. Anyway, so Ghost Spy Lady shows up. Yep, she's totally dead, guys. Don't worry about it. She totally won't be back as a plot device later. Anyway, the guy decides to explode a bridge with his mind. He doesn't decide to blow up the area right under you instead. You know what? I don't think that was actually him blowing it up with his mind. I'm pretty sure that was just him kind of having everything set up to fall apart beforehand, just to try to serve as intimidation factor. Anyway, birds eat wizards, of course, so they go down like nothing, and this right here is a fantastic lesson in why you don't wait around when there's Gorgons on the map. Because for some reason, being an idiot, I didn't catch that there was a snake lady there and just had them all facing forward when they ended up, well, all getting petrified. So that went well. Somehow no casualties, despite the fact that it got very, very, very close, but just enough units managed to make it through to go and smush this guy. Funnily enough, he's actually one of the few units that's actually weak to wind shot, or windstorm, what have you, for no apparent reason. So we send Eleanor out with the rest in order to go and smush these angels over here, as you do. Birds don't eat angels as much, but you know what, they can have a bit of a varied diet at times. So either way, not really much of a fight, because again, the entire thing just comes down to wait a couple of rounds and dump everything on there at once. So, did I have the time completely wrong on my emulator? Who knows. Whatever. Anyway, so, at this point we get into the last fight, and you might be wondering, wait a minute, how does that make any sense? This video's half done. Yeah, so, about that. So you might be getting the distinct impression at this point that we're not quite done here, and yeah, we're not. So, figured first of all, we're going to go ahead and send Eleanor out. We're going to go send all of the named characters, as it were. Leave all the generics behind. We're going to go in full birds, no chickens. All seems like a pretty solid way to go about it. We came in at 31, so we should reasonably be... Well, I was hoping to make it a fair fight, is the thing. I was hoping to come in at a matching level and maybe figure out some cheese for the birds to, you know, I was thinking maybe we could just drop some wind shots at a distance. So, first fight we go in, everything seems going decently enough. We start noticing that we can overpower these demons and angels and things, and we can just kind of splash them all, take them out in big groups. And that should hopefully give us enough time to go and regroup the entire party in order to be able to, you know, get our team together, so to speak, to get everybody all healed up and all charged up and everything else, get all of our big wind shot spam going right before the final fight, right? Well, this ended up falling apart pretty much immediately. So we ended up taking out these little groups that would consistently clump up in the front just fine, but unfortunately this wasn't going to last for the long term. Pretty much, as you probably have already guessed, the big AoE splash ended up hitting all these guys particularly hard, to the point that we'd be burned out of heals long before we'd be able to actually fully set up for the fight. And additionally, when I was going and seeing if I'd be able to recruit any of these guys to make the fight a little bit easier, or maybe take some of the hits for us, that wasn't really looking too promising either. I actually had a bit of an idea at this point of like, well, if I need a bit of a power boost, maybe I recruit one of these guys, and maybe I have them use the Snapdragon, and, you know, it feels kind of appropriate. That was a dumb decision. A, you can't hire these guys. B, they'd be under guest control anyway, so you wouldn't be able to do anything about it. And probably the reason that you can't hire them is for the, you know, the obvious thing of, well, you can't actually get yourself out of this. Well, you can't have too many units for the next part. It would be kind of cool if you could, but I'm pretty sure that the game wouldn't be able to handle it, and it would probably explode if you did. Anyway, so we proceed to just eat all of these guys as you do. They do give you some pretty handy drops, like orbs and full heals and such, mending salves and what have you. But unfortunately, yeah, we weren't able to get any more tricky than that. Additionally, the map-wide AoE that Shahir does also causes, and by the way, for anyone that's doing a mod on this at any given point, please use the name Shaharing as Kaharing for one of those, because they just share every debuff in the game with you. In this particular case, they're just putting everybody to sleep, but later on they give you everything. But yeah. Anyway, so we start realizing that we're just kind of losing units along the way. These birds are trying their best, but realistically they can't keep up with all the stuff that's coming out of the other side of the map from one single unit. But so we're going to start burning through all our salves pretty much immediately. It's not an ideal situation. I thought 40 would be overkill, because after the fairy run, you know what, they just could spam Magic Missile at this point. They were hitting everything for 50s, they would just run up and machine gun down Cher, and, you know, totally easy fight. But there were a few mechanics that got missed. That sleep mechanic, which we were just dodging last time. These guys have decently okay agility to dodge some things, but it was really only the ones with the agility armbands that were actually able to completely dodge a lot of those attacks. Turns out their dodge rates don't get nearly as high as fairies do. So there was that. Second of all was the fact that we were doing 13s to Cher at this point, meaning it would take somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 30 attacks, depending on who was attacking, in order to actually get their bar down. Another thing was that we couldn't actually get close, because if you get close, they do an HP and MP steal, which means that if they get that MP steal off, they're going and spamming this move, which we cannot counter every single round. So they're just going in there, putting everybody to sleep. We cannot deal with this, because, again, Beast Tamers and Griffins, we don't have any access to anything more fancy than that. So this part went absolutely great. We 100% have an answer for this, with the total of 3 actions that they can take. Now, given everything, you know, maybe go attack your own units, that's certainly an option, but unfortunately then you're burning through the healing supplies. If you're just going and healing and waiting, then you're still taking more hits from there. If you're going and potentially spending all that money on the healing items to get all this stuff restored as well, then obviously you're not getting as many healing items, and or are just doing more grinding, and yeah, let's just say that there were problems on problems on problems with this whole kind of setup as a whole. So anyway, we proceed to just figure the ideal strategy here would just be to run up and bombard. Because another fun quirk of this fight is if the demons survive, or if Cher is solo, they'll actually summon more backup. But if you leave both of the twins there, and you just kind of leave about 4 units total on their side, they won't bother summoning that backup, and you can just kind of sit here spamming everything at a distance, right? So I figured if I hit something else while nearby, great. Otherwise, we're mostly just kind of sitting here and hoping for the best. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, this is the easy part. How is this going to work going forward? Yeah, that was the problem. That was why we're only halfway through this video right now. Because these guys do absolutely nothing in terms of, you know, damage and stuff at this point. They're simply hard countered by bosses. We simply don't... While these guys are bulkier than many other units around, they're not that bulky. Comparatively speaking, we're talking like 30-40 extra health compared to the other stuff. I mean, again, comparing in Reborn, they've got like double, sometimes triple the health of everything else in the field. In this particular case, they've got maybe 10-20% extra. It's, yeah, they don't have much going for them. But anyway, this is why we started off with their weakest version, because we're going to get into the crazier stuff as we go along, you know? So yeah. This goes on for quite some time. I just kind of wanted to leave a little reminder here over how long this took. Can you imagine if fast forward was not a thing for this particular section? Yeah, we'd be here for a little while. Hopefully you get the idea. We're just going to go ahead and skip ahead slightly. So we are now at the final fight here. Cher finally ended up getting that final hit there, and they send us off to the Hell Dimension, as you do. Now, you might notice at this point we're a bit drained. We're halfway drained. We're low on items. I keep almost accidentally turning somebody into a Snapdragon because I keep seeing that dang thing in the menu. I didn't even intend to get it at this point. You might notice our movement is still only 4 for a lot of these units. That is basic soldier movement. So, yeah, they definitely don't have the movement thing this time around. They definitely got the attack range, they just... yeah. They're like a limited, bulky, giga-shitty wizard in Night of Lodis, but yeah, this is when that wonderful thing of being completely vulnerable to every debuff on the map decides to show its nice ugly face here, because yeah, every time that they use their debuff move, everybody gets ruined. It's, yeah, not exactly a great time for that. Anyway, we end up doing all our win shots here. We can't even get the spear close as of yet, but we're trying to get there. I have Eleanor using the spear. I still have a spear chucker over on Roran. We're trying our best to get that damage to bear. Everyone's morale is completely ruined. They're just having a terrible day. We've got a couple of them that are confused. One was turned into a dank statue, and we only have one item to revert that. Because I have it running on fast forward, the buttons are all going crazy. I can't even hit the right tiles at this particular juncture here. And even when they're getting hit, we're seeing some cases where they're getting hit for potentially as much as they can heal in a single round. We just simply don't have as many healing items as would be ideal. And so I figure, you know what, whatever. We're just going to throw away the B ending. Worst case scenario, something interesting happens. I don't even know how we're going to possibly come up with the damage numbers at this point, because our heaviest hitter does 12. Our one-shot units are going up, they're doing their whole thing here. But due to the fact that everyone's morale is ruined, all of that, we're doing 7, or 9 in that particular case, but, you know, predicted 7. It can roll higher or lower. And regardless of range, simply put, we just don't have the resources to be able to pull something like this off, doing only 7 to 10 damage at a time. It's just unreasonable. And this is the point at which I decided to see if maybe Thunderflare would be doing a little bit better, and yeah, that's going to be a no. Basically, Windstorm is the same thing as Thunderflare with a slightly different cost. It's a very slight difference. Essentially, 1 less MP for 1 less damage. It's functionally the same thing. So, that's fun. We have everybody trying to spam these heals as much as possible. I have no idea how many of those are left, because, you know, it doesn't really give you an item counter. That guy's only doing 6 damage, which is absolutely wonderful. If we get anybody close with that massive drop in morale, it's just simply not going to happen. You know, Roran is celebrating, even though his girlfriend just got vaporized, but whatever. All the birds are trying, but they really can't do very much. They really can't hurt this guy for much of anything. Just morale is destroyed, even when trying to use the morale bonus. They're still looking at negative numbers on top of already being fully resisted. This is plink beyond plink. Like, this is just ultimate sadness in bird form. They're doing absolutely nothing. So we needed a way to get around this. And then I was thinking, you know what? As much as I would like this to be an Iron Man run, there is technically a different ending that happens if you end up going and losing here. Now, don't worry. This I wasn't going to go for a cop-out of like, haha, de-ending. Technically, it ended. That's credits, and we're out of here kind of situation. No. That would be extremely lame. But it did give me an idea. See, because I had overwritten my save at this point, so one way or another, you know, was going through it in this particular way. But you can revert back to your previous save, while also keeping some of the items that you picked up along the way by going through that de-ending. You even get a unique emblem for it. So yeah, this was kind of... we're just going to pretend this was a bit of a bad dream, and yeah, we're going to keep trying to burn through these items. We're going to go ahead and call this a precognition dream or something like that, but just wanted to see how far we could get at this point. Down to the ground here, and it's a bit of a bummer. So I figure, okay, we're going to try this a couple of other ways. I tried a few other setups, tried seeing if maybe just moving some equipment around might do the trick. I tried seeing if maybe just having Roran use the spear would be the way to go. Tried fighting those guys directly. Tried burning all our wind shots to try to burn through, because one of the ways to handle this fight is essentially to spam attacks hard enough to be able to break through his frontliners, which would then allow him to more or less be stun-locked out of using their debuff move by being able to constantly force him into spawning more units. The problem is you have to be able to kill off 3 units per round. Which, simply put, we don't have the numbers to do, right? And you may notice there was a guard there. That was because of the Necklace of Resist, which I had moved over to one of those guys at this point. Anyway, it wasn't quite happening. So sometime later, we look at the D ending, and after 7 days, the island disappeared, and then we got the D ending. But we could do better. So we used that to essentially convert our save back into a sort of pseudo New Game Plus save, but you get a Cycle of Life over for Roran, which I was kind of curious. I couldn't remember if it allowed him to turn into a Lich, but that's normally the one that you need to turn into a Lich. But that would be a no in his particular case. So there's a bit of a hidden mechanic. Not so much hidden as much as just generally not very appealing when it comes to the Snapdragon. So the Snapdragon will essentially allow you to convert any one unit into a weapon, right? So the kind of hidden effect on this is that any unit converted will also carry over their effects to the wielder carrying it next. Meaning, in this particular case, we actually can turn Eleanor into a beast tamer. So by essentially just going and maxing out the level of of this guy, who we've gone ahead and named Fisher Fork to give the weapon an appropriate name, which essentially allows her to use the Beast Tamer morale buff. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that's going to make her crazy overpowered. Yeah, you'd be kind of shocked. Anyway, surprisingly, despite having one of the most powerful weapons in the game, primarily she's going to be used as a morale bonus. So, we get the Fisher Fork with its 85 attack. It's slightly higher than the Longicalness, although realistically he's still going to do dramatically more with that thing. We end up going into having the two of them go and fight it out in a river for the next few hours in order to go and level cap the entire party. The AI caps at about level 36, meaning that we now can carry a +2 morale bonus on all of our Griffins, which improves their damage slightly. It's pretty much one of the only ways that we can actually get their damage to go up, because Crowns of Intellect are fairly rare. So, rather than going through quest mode 80 billion times, again, just went up to the level cap, got the morale bonus up, and then we proceeded to go and stomp through this whole area once again. Additionally, this ended up unlocking Star Tiara on Eleanor, which meant that we basically got 1 free orb usage, and additionally, at some point we picked up an orb, and at some point we picked up a second Snapdragon. I have absolutely no idea where those came from, because as far as I'm aware, we only picked up 1. I never went into the Elric fight, I never picked up any of the other Snapdragons as far as I'm aware. So maybe there was some accidental item dupe that happened, I have no frickin' idea. But either way, we somehow got a second Snapdragon that I never ended up using. Come to think of it, I wonder if maybe it's a weird side effect of the D ending. This time around, learned from the first time around, and had all of the Griffins facing backwards so that they wouldn't be hit by Petrifying Gaze, and then we proceeded to thoroughly steamroll this guy, as you do, because he's got basically no resistance versus these birds. Additionally, the second team went and, well, it was just all Griffins. It was just all of the extras who wouldn't be showing up for the finale, who just wanted to go and feast on all of the little pigeons hanging up here in the gardens. This is more their very, very hungry side story, more so than anything actually, difficult or practical or what have you. They just proceeded to bombard this poor, unfortunate Flappy thing for a little while. And yeah, that was kind of the end of that. So, moving right along. We then go into our final fight, using our 5 named birds, as well as our chicken. Now, the reason for the chicken was because I figured, well, I never actually checked if debuffs could be applied to those 4 guys at the end, meaning that technically speaking, it might be possible to just fully disable them. Now, as far as the cockatrice goes in this particular game, the petrification is very useful. Unfortunately, it takes 3 rounds to be able to activate, after which you can use it every 2 rounds because of the 25 MP cost. Now, the downside of all of this whole situation is that while the chicken can do all of that stuff, it doesn't have nearly the range of Windstorm, and additionally, a lot of things are just immune to petrification. And on top of that, you mostly just want to use them for their physical attacking prowess, though, again, just like the Griffin, they're not nearly as bulky as you kind of hope. So anyway, we proceeded to go and stomp through this map, and due to the fact that everybody's got nearly double the health that they did last time, we're able to survive these things a lot better. The couple of salves that we've gotten are going to be going and carrying us a lot farther, and additionally, I think that orb may have potentially dropped in this fight. I legitimately don't remember, because again, we never had one going in the first time, and I never went into quest mode or anything for the second part. Just kind of seemed a bit cheap to do that. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that it must just be a chance drop on this fight or something. Either way, just a useful thing to help burn down that second phase. So we just hang out at the bottom of the stairs here and continue windstorming it up, using that morale bonus to take less damage and do more in return. Eventually I ended up sending out the chicken to try to see if they could do something a bit more fancy. But yeah, just lots of this. Just lots of sitting and waiting and windstorming and what have you. It's not exactly the fastest process, and we're still as vulnerable to these debuffs as ever, but hey, it's a slight improvement, you know? Either way, moving on to the second phase this time around, we came in far better prepared. Yeah, and it turns out the Petrification Breath does absolutely nothing to share, but anyway, so we move on to the second phase here. I have everybody split up and go off to their different sides, use their heal-ups, and the general idea here was fairly simple. We just want to try and burn down we want to try and burn down these units as much as we can, do the old strategy of trying to get them to spawn more dudes, trying to get Roran over there around the side with his spear to go impale the demon, and then we have Eleanor sitting here with the Fisher Fork, attempting to use her morale bonus to overcome the morale bonus or the morale penalty from having these guys around. So as long as there's one, they can at least be neutral, and they're not going, dipping severely below their usual expected damage here. Over time, He ends up spawning more and more giants. Now, generally speaking, the ninjas are the easiest to remove, the giants are the easiest to dodge, and the dragoons are usually a terrible nightmare that you want to avoid at all costs. But there were several rounds where I was able to get +2 morale by keeping both of the beast tamers nearby all the birds, and keeping all the other guys away, using the chicken to try and lure everybody out in other directions. For some reason, they just really wanted chicken that day. But either way, this allowed us to more or less double our damage versus this guy, going up to 20s instead of 10s. This allowed for being able to survive a lot more due to the extra added bulk and what have you. It turns out that all of these kind of blue demon units are going to be far more resilient to debuffs. I'm not even sure if they can be hit by debuffs whatsoever, but they seemed to be fully immune to them in this particular instance. And so we just continued dropping win-shot after win-shot after win-shot after win-shot after win-shot on these guys, roughly in the ballpark of, I think it was like 60 attacks to get this guy taken out. So it was quite the mess of different stuff. I just left it here going on fast forward to give you an idea of how freaking long this took, because it was down to the wire, down to pretty much burning through all of our healing items, despite additional stocking up. I eventually got to the point that I was going and rushing down with additional units, because I wasn't sure how long we'd be able to continue fighting the dragoon that ended up spawning there. So it was just looking worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. A lot of them ended up getting paralyzed, which led to even more desperation towards the very end there. Started getting more and more crazy. Quest and Marshmallow end up getting taken out by a sweep, unfortunately, which we'll just go ahead and pretend that Quest got knocked off the map at this point, by the way. Simply put, she's going to be required for the next one, so we're just going to pretend she got slapped into another dimension and move on. Then Askell got slapped out of existence. Marshmallow just got marshmallowed. I don't know, they just stepped too close to a campfire. And finally, Treadle's the one that ends up actually getting the kill to avenge their fallen dude. And then we get to a plot contrivance. Namely, the totally not Lucifer ends up dying, but ends up not dying, and of course, you know, it's one of these stories, so they have to do a big dramatic self-destruct at the very end, and Sybil, despite being exploded, then exploded again by birds, then stabbed by herself, and possessed by demons, and also behind a bridge that is currently inaccessible, somehow winds up getting here anyway. I'm assuming she's just got like one of those like freaking like Ada Wong grappling guns or something. Either way, somehow she's here and she just decides, yeah, I'm just gonna go hug this demon until they explode, and somehow everyone's gonna get out of this hell dimension just fine, don't question it. You know what, asking too many questions. Just carry on, just move on to the next scene. No one has to worry about why. You know, just beats me how this works. By all means, it makes no sense. Anyway, so, everyone talks about religion for a while. Demon self-destructs. She says that is her sister, and we've managed to get through this whole thing using just Griffins. It was a bit of an ordeal. Definitely a lot more difficult than I was expecting. I didn't really think that they would be that dang weak going towards the end of it. Like, going from like the entire Mermaid section off to about 3/4 of the way through, it seemed like a total shoe-in for being an absolute cakewalk of a run, and then they just got flattened hard by the end there. So yeah, there's that. That's all of Night of Lodis, beaten with just birds. I love that on the B route, the Tartaros picture ends up getting burned away, and then Richter and Ivana end up ruling this place together. Obviously, apparently they decided to make it official after it's already happened, but oh well, details. And then everybody goes off on their merry way. The food ended up surviving, as they do. They have a little bit of a wind scene there that somebody worked hard to put out there. And then they go off into the distance. And so that was that. And the rest of the series is kind of impossible, but it is what it is. So that's 7 deaths over the course of our team. 6 got dismissed, and that's about that. So at this point, we'll just go ahead and look over the emblems that Roran ended up collecting. Ended up running two rings because it seemed appropriate. You know, they like their shiny objects and what have you. And there we go. We get our relicses for getting the true ending, and that's about that. Y'all have yourselves a good one. Can't wait to do the rest of the series like this. All right, take care.